everyone, I'm Cheryl Mahoney, and I blog at marveloustales.com about books, writing, and movies, sometimes, like today. I also am the author of The Guardian of the Opera trilogy, a retelling of The Phantom of the Opera. But today I'm here to talk about one of the most famous versions and probably most seen, the 2004 Andrew Lloyd Webber movie version starring Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum. This is not to be confused with the 2011 25th anniversary stage play version. They did a special event at Royal Albert Hall and filmed the play. But today I'm talking about this one. So I saw this when it first came out, and it was one of the first versions of The Phantom I saw. It is a very popular one. It is a slightly controversial one. There are some things I like. There are some things I don't. But I have a theory about the things I don't. And if you love this, I don't know if you're going to like my theory. If you have some problems with this one, I may give you a new way to watch it and enjoy it a little bit more, because that's what worked for me. So I did see this when it first came out in theaters. I was quite new to Phantom fandom at the time. I had read the Gaston Leroux book, and I had listened to the Andrew Lloyd Webber, Michael Crawford soundtrack. But I had not seen the play yet. I think this was only a few months after I read the book, so I don't think I'd even seen Lon Chaney, or I'm quite certain I hadn't seen Charles Dance. A lot of the later movie and book versions that I read or watched later, I hadn't gotten them yet. This was near the beginning. I think that helped me like it more at the time. After seeing the play, after reading more versions, I didn't return to this actually for years because I was suspecting I was not going to like it as well anymore. When I did finally watch it, I actually enjoyed it immensely. But as I said, I had a theory about some of the things that were not choices I would have made. But I'll get to that later. First, let me tell you the good things. I don't want to just pile on about the things I didn't like. So, Gerard Butler, I did like him in the role of the Phantom. It's possibly a little bit strange to cast an actor in the role of the Phantom based on what he looks like. The whole concept of the story is that he's a deformed man living under an opera house. But Gerard Butler does look really good in the mask, so I enjoy that part of it. He gets a lot of bad press about his singing, and I do understand where people are coming from with that, because he's an actor, not a professional singer. I am not a professional singer either, but you can tell. I'm not that bothered by his singing though, probably because I'm not a professional singer and I'm not as sensitive to that as some people will be. I will also say, I've heard people on the stage play sing this in a way that I did not like either. So, I don't think it's fair to hate on Butler too much for that. In my perfect world, they would have dubbed in Michael Crawford for the singing, but they didn't make that choice. And, barring that possibility, I'm not that bothered by Gerard Butler's singing. It's fine. I'm kind of amused, actually, that he turns he is Scottish. Most of the time you can't tell until the Phantom gets angry, and all of a sudden there's like these rolling R's and the Phantom sounds a lot more Scottish, and I find it funny. So there's that. Speaking of the Phantom being angry, this is a more violent Phantom than I have usually seen. I have seen angry and more violent Phantoms on the stage too. I've seen the play a lot of times, I'll just say. So I've seen a lot of versions and variations. Some of them have been very angry. So it's not like totally out there, but it is a more violent choice than I probably would have made if I had been directing this. I also feel like it's sort of strangely contradictory, that someone had to hold the contradictory ideas of, we will cast a very handsome man as the Phantom and make him a more romantic and appealing lead character. We will also make him a cold-blooded, brutal murderer and make that look even worse than it does on stage, because that won't undercut the romance at all. I don't know, but I have a theory. I'll get to it. Emmy Rossum, I like in the role. She sings very well. She's also quite young, but Christine is, and so I think that works very well also. I also really like what she does in the Don Juan triumphant sequence, where normally when I see this on the play, before the opera within the play starts, Christine is all, I'm afraid, I don't want to do this, Raoul, don't make me do this, and Raoul makes her do it, but that's a different story. But once she gets on stage, we don't see her be afraid anymore. She's just totally in the role that she's playing on stage, and we kind of lose that underlying level. I actually like the way Emmy Rossum still looks afraid. You get that meta level, because it gets complicated. There's the actress playing Christine, who is feeling one thing, but is also on stage playing something else. And you actually get all those levels in there, I think. And so I like that they managed that nuance. The other, to me, most important character is Meg Giry. Not the most important character to most people, I think, but Meg is the lead of my version of this story, so she's important to me. And I like her role in this one. She gets a little bit of extra screen time in a few places. We see her a little bit more than we do in the play. We definitely get the sense that she's very interested in the Phantom and really wondering what's going on with Christine, and has a little more going on with her too, which I like a lot. There's also a couple of nice moments where you see some tenderness between her and her mother. I think it's more implied than like actual dialogue, but it's also something that's not in the play, but should be there. Madame Giry is her mother, so I like that as well. I enjoy Meg in this for sure. I like some of the costumes. They get to do some very elaborate things. I like some of the sets. I like that they can get out of the opera house a little bit in a way that you can't in a play. I'm running out of good things, so let me tell you about my theory about some of the things that I didn't like as well. So basically, in the play version, we start out with this prologue piece where it's many years later, and there's an auction at the opera house, and a much older Raoul is there bidding on things. And then they lift the chandelier, and the music starts, and we flash back into the past, and we never see that later time period again. This is different, though, because in this one, we do keep returning to the later time period, and we keep returning to Raoul. He bought the monkey music box, and he's like out traveling through Paris, and spoilers, he goes to Christine's grave. I mean, nothing much is actually happening, but we keep returning to him. And I think what's happening is that the flashback portions, we're not traveling through time. We're not seeing what actually happened. We're seeing Raoul remembering it or imagining it for the parts that he was not there. And that changes things, because my theory is that Raoul is not actually a reliable narrator. We're not seeing what happened. I know it's fictional, but within the fictional world, what happened? We're seeing it through Raoul's possibly distorted lens. So there's a few different things that could relate to, and that supports my particular theory. Andre and Firmin, the managers of the opera. In the stage play, they're different characters. I can actually tell them apart. In this one, not really. They seem to be just the managers of the opera. They're a unit. They're not really different from each other. Because Raoul doesn't really know them. He thinks of them as a unit, as the managers of the opera. He's not really interested in whether one of them is interested in business and one of them is interested in music. He just thinks of them as Andre and Firmin, as though that's one unit. And so that's how we're seeing them. The opera sequences. When I said I liked the costumes, I didn't mean that part. Because the opera sequences in this, when they're performing at the opera house, kind of look like a lot of people in funny clothes wearing really weird wigs and like prancing about on the stage. I mean, more than they do in the play, although sometimes the play looks a little bit goofy and intentionally so, but they're like more so in this one. Because Raoul doesn't know anything about opera. This is how he remembers opera being. People in funny wigs prancing on stage. Because unlike almost everyone else in this play, Raoul is not an artist. He's the young nobleman coming to the opera. he's really just here to see Christine. He doesn't know what opera is supposed to look like, so when he remembers it, it looks pretty ridiculous. Another possibility that could be a distortion of the narrative, I mentioned how angry and murderous the Phantom is. Well, of course, Raoul is going to imagine that the Phantom was violent and angry and absolutely murdered Bouquet as just cold-blooded, premeditated murder. That is definitely how Raoul would understand all of this to have happened. Sidebar, slightly, although not exactly. I have the 2-disc version of this movie because I specifically wanted the deleted scene, No One Would Listen. It's just the Phantom alone under the opera house singing this quite lovely, quite heartbreaking song about how he wants to reach out to the world, but no one is listening. I know it got cut from the movie probably because it was not in the staged play and they didn't want to change that much. But it also could have been cut because there was no one there to tell it to Raoul. Raoul can't tell us, or remember it, imagine it, if no one told him, and there was no one there to tell him. It is also a softer, gentler version of the Phantom in that particular scene. He does not seem as angry. He seems more sympathetic. He seems more heartbroken, which is not how Raoul would want to remember him at all. I also feel like he sings a little bit better in that song. That's one of his better sung songs, which makes it particularly unfortunate that it got cut. But it also makes sense that Raoul would probably remember the Phantom as not being really that great of a singer. I mean, Christine says so, but you know, he was just okay. Because Raoul would be threatened by the Phantom being a really good singer. I don't think he'd mind that the Phantom appears handsome when he's wearing a mask, because Raoul knows what he looks like when he takes the mask off. So, I mean, that's just not even a competition between the two of them. So Raoul would be fine with that. But he'd probably prefer that the Phantom not be a particularly amazing singer. Another thing, also with the costumes, that I found a little bit odd, actually. Christine spends a surprising amount of this movie in her undergarments. Like moments when she was not wearing undergarments in the play, suddenly she is in this one. And to be clear, they don't look that risque to a modern audience because we're used to women wearing, you know, sleeveless shirts, for example, and actually like showing their limbs to people. So she's got like a corset and long slip and some kind of chemise thing going on. And it's not particularly risque to a modern audience, but it would be for the late 1800s. And no matter how much it is or isn't covering, it's still her undergarments. So one, why would she be wearing those at moments like, moments that are not appropriate for that? But two, maybe that's how Raoul likes to picture Christine. I mean, you can understand that. That makes sense, actually. that could explain that. Final thing, also about Christine. One thing that's the interactions between Christine and the Phantom, more in the movie than in any of the plays. The Phantom starts singing and Christine seems to be hypnotized. Like she is just drawn to him. She can't resist. She's goes all like glassy-eyed and doesn't even know what's happening. And can't you just imagine that for 20, 30 years, Christine was telling Raoul, "Oh yes, honey, I was hypnotized by the Phantom." That's why I kept like going towards him or going back to him. I mean, he had me hypnotized. I'm not attracted to him. I didn't like him. I love you. I was hypnotized. And I think Raoul would buy that. And if you read my version, incidentally, you will also find out why I don't think you can necessarily trust everything Christine says. But that is a different video as well. So a lot of things in this, as you will gather reading not very far between the lines, I did not actually really like the choices they made, but they actually tie pretty well together into the idea that they are this way because this is how Raoul would tell the story. Do I think that anyone, Weber, anyone, intended Raoul to be an unreliable narrator? Not really. I think they may actually have intended him to be the narrator. I do think that's what going back to the later time with him was supposed to be about. I don't think they meant him to be getting it wrong. But I enjoy the story much more when I think about it that way. Maybe you will too, if you have had some issues with this particular movie in the past. If you love it and it's your favorite, just ignore me. Enjoy it. I'm glad you have fun with it. So there you have the Gerard Butler 2004 Phantom of the Opera. Some things that I enjoy, some things that I find strange, but possibly things that can be explained. If you would like to see another of my theories on the story, I guess we could say it that way, you can also read my version, Nocturne, Book 1 of the Guardian of the Opera trilogy. It will be out June 5th. It's another way of looking at the story. Raoul, I think, got to tell this one, and it looks a certain way through his eyes. Meg gets to tell the story in my version, and some things may look different through her eyes as well. So I hope you'll check it out. You can find me and also other reviews at marveloustales.com. And again, Nocturne will be out June 5th. Thanks so much for watching.